So what are you moving? Are you
So yeah,
leaving?
so moving to Brooklyn in December.
Are you?
Finally, yeah, which was always the plan as soon as the kids, were out of the house, because living in Brooklyn with 4 kids was probably
Impossible.
beyond my means, impossible. Oh God,
Yeah.
no, I've got a text from. Let's just ignore that. That's what I mean about wanting to turn these texts off, but we'll just ignore the ping.
Just turn it off. Turn it
Yeah,
over. Face down.
exactly. Yeah.
It's really low.
So the kids are finally the last of the kids are finally leaving home. I know you've just been through this, haven't you?
I
Yeah.
have. And I have to say, even though I was fully prepped and I've always lived my own life and I've never God, I love my kids, but they've never been the center of my world. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'm not like that. I work and honestly, my writing is the center of my world because I know that's the thing that will never leave me. Whereas I'm perfectly clear that I was a writer before I had children. My children then took up a huge amount of space and then they will leave.
Yeah.
And I will be me in my work again, which is exactly what's happened. But having said that, there was grief. Like I was a bit embarrassed actually
Yeah.
because I'd always been a little bit snobbish.
About people
Of
who get empty nest syndrome. It's like,
that,
oh my God, I
yeah.
can't wait for my
Please,
kids to
me.
leave home. Look at all the time I'm going to have. I'm going to have this like amazing life. But you become institutionalized as a parent.
Maybe that's the word.
You just get used
Yeah,
to it. It just becomes part of your life, even if you're trying to make more space, and you can never have enough space. And you're always complaining about not having enough space, and there's never enough time, and the neediness and all the rest of it. And
yeah.
then when it's gone, it's like, wait, what?
What
Where
the
is
fuck?
it?
Maybe that's the word for it because empty nest always. I mean, there are so many
Yeah,
words,
no,
Oliver,
that
seriously.
doesn't. Yeah,
But that's one of the phrases. I'm just like, don't give me I'm not like that.
yeah.
I would be saying I did
Yeah.
myself, and I
Yeah,
still
because
hope that.
because that's for people who don't have a life beyond their children, right? Not for people like you and me. I know, it's that awful, awful snobbery, but it's
I'm a
true.
terrible. Oh, I'm also not a very nice person.
Yeah, well, there you
But
go.
it's true. But yes, maybe institutionalized is the word for
I
it
think so. Yeah.
because one of mine, well, they're all sort of swinging back again now. That one of them is in Wales, and one of them's just swung back and is here in the flat. They've actually gone out just now, but I've just spent the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 days with them. I'm exhausted.
I know.
Fucking hell, like I love you, but really,
But really,
all of my
just
routines are
stop.
out the span. The novel that I'm
Yeah,
writing is it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
you
I don't
know.
know. I don't think parenting ever ends.
Well, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't, which is beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. But this bit where they're leaving it, I think what you'll find, and certainly what my friends tell me, and what I'm finding is they leave, they come back, they leave, they come back. That they don't quite do that full thing where you
Yeah,
can
the full
really
fledge.
stuff
There's a bit
your
of
new
whiplash
life
going
for
on.
there's about 5 years of coming and going.
Yeah, which is
So are you
I don't know if
getting
that's better or worse.
well, I think it's just how it is. But are you getting a flat that's too small to have 4 of them?
No, well, I mean, sort of yes. I mean, yes and no. I mean, there's going to be room for them, but it's going to be a squish. So,
Yeah.
they will probably not want to be living with me full time. I mean, my
Yeah.
brother lives in London. He's got 5 kids, and the
Yeah,
oldest is
okay.
27. And I think they're all still living at home because they go off to college and then they can't afford to get their own places. And then they come back to him and he's like, oh, well, we're just living in a commune now for the rest of our lives, which he seems perfectly
Yeah.
happy with. In fact, he bought himself a camper van, which is his office out on the
Mm.
street. And when all the kids, oh wait, I've just lost you,
Oh,
Eleanor.
oh no,
Oh, there you
I'm
are.
still here.
Okay, sorry.
I'm here.
The thing went. We've
We're
we've got a
gonna go
funny
now.
connection because you're a bit pixelated, and I may be too. So
We're just gonna have to deal
well,
with
yeah,
it.
exactly.
We can
We'll
blame.
just we'll,
Let's blame.
we'll just plow on through. Yeah, so he bought a camper van, which is where he runs his business from. And when all the kids are home, he and his wife sleep in the camper van because there's not enough room in the house.
Okay,
So
that's kind of brilliant.
it is kind of brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you miss anything about England?
Oh yes. Yeah. I mean, I
Okay.
miss the English. I miss the English countryside. I miss the landscape because it's in my
Yeah.
blood. I miss
Yeah.
that. That was. I mean, all due respect to my family, who I love dearly. Obviously, I miss them too. But I miss the English countryside, and I always knew I would because I mean, there's nothing like it. And I think this is true of anybody who lives in a different country to the country that they're born in. I think that's like a universal experience. And for a long time, I didn't understand um, that was just part of the experience of being a diasporic immigrant, and that is what everybody felt if they lived in a different country, and you just kind of get used to it. For a long time, it was like, does this mean I want to go back home? But
Mm.
I, I, now that I've understood that, and now that I've like sort of really completely individuated and separated from England, I love going back because I know I'm going back as a visitor. And I know I will only ever go back as a visitor. And so for me, when I go back, it's a vacation. I am visiting my friends, I'm visiting my family, I'm visiting my old country, but I don't feel like I belong there.
Okay.
And you know, I never felt like I belonged there. So it took a while for me to really get my head around the fact that you cannot belong to a place where you were born, and you cannot belong to a society that you were born into, and you cannot belong to a community of people who were the only people who were kind of surrounding you when you were growing up. And the best way I can explain it is it feels a bit like being adopted. It felt like I always felt like I felt like I was a spy. I felt like, you know, like the British spies must have felt during the Second World War, you know, when they were trying to speak German perfectly and kind of pass and do all this stuff. I was like, it feels like I am trying to impersonate these people. And somebody is going to discover that I'm not one of them. And then I'm going to be exposed. And then that's going to result in something terrible happening. And then I would say, but this is weird because I'm not impersonating them. I did grow up with them. I grew up in this. I know this language. I know, you know, because you know what it's like with the upper middle class. There are all these kind of these subtle mannerisms and languages and things that kind of define what it means to be in that society. And I'm like, I know this. I've grown up with this. I'm not faking it, but it always felt like I was faking it. And it took me a really long time to understand why that was.
Okay, so let's unpack that then. So you felt as a child that you were faking it, but you
Yeah, I
hadn't
mean,
understood.
I would say it started when I went to boarding school, partly because, you know, going
Okay.
to boarding school at 11 coincided with the beginning of puberty. So prior to that, I was just, you know, my parents, we lived in this, you know, typical country Hampshire farmhouse. And, you know, as was typical in the 80s, I just wore my brother's cast offs. So I just wore shorts and t-shirts all day because that's what my brother wore, right? So it was,
Yep.
so prior to the age of 11, I was pretty comfortable. I was at home with my parents. I
Okay.
was just, you know, gender was like, whatever, who cares? Doesn't, just meaningless to me.
Yeah.
And then suddenly all girls boarding school, school uniform, gender and puberty all at once. And so that's when I was like, whoa, there's something about this that's not right. But it, it, that there was at no point could I put my finger on what it was. And a lot of people have said to me, why did it take you so long to come out? Because I came out, first of all, I came out as gay, which you've read the memoir, but for anybody who's listening who hasn't. So I came
I'm
out as
just going
gay.
to hold up. Really
Uh,
brilliant. This is
that's
the
the
UK cover.
That's the UK cover, exactly. So I came out as a lesbian when I was 40, and then 7 years later I started transitioning. And so people were like, you know, why did it take you so long to realize you were a lesbian? You know, I went to art, you know, one of my exes was like, you went to art school in London. How is
Yeah.
it possible that you did 4 years in London at art school and didn't figure out that you were a lesbian? And the
Yeah.
answer is because I wasn't a lesbian.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when I saw lesbians, I'm like, that's not me. And when I saw gay men,
Mm.
I was like, that's not me. And when I saw heterosexual people, I'm like, that's not me. And of course, I didn't see any trans people. There weren't any. There were none. I mean, there were none when I was
Yeah.
back in the 80s and 90s. There were just
Yeah.
none. The closest, the closest I came, the closest I came, this is so ridiculous, these things that we remember. I remember somebody inviting me to a party. Do you remember Madame Jojo's in London?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of
So
course.
somebody invited
Yeah.
me to a party in Madame Jojo's and I turned it down because I couldn't go. I couldn't go to a club that was run by drag queens and be on this side of the fence. And I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I just knew that I wouldn't be able to get through it. That I would
Were you conscious of that thought, though? Or had
I
you articulated thought
no,
or
I didn't
not?
articulate the thought because every time I had these kind of thoughts, I would just like push it aside. So my feelings for women, I would just blinker them into my periphery vision because I was so frightened of what it would mean if I acknowledged them. So now looking back, I can see all the times when this stuff came into sort of full focus in front of me and I'm just like, no. And that was why I turned down that invitation because it's like, yeah, no, there's no way I'm putting myself in that position because I won't be able to cope with it. I mean, even now I can feel the emotions of,
Mm.
and, and, and partly that was because, so, you know, in a sense, my self-preservation was correct given the times that we were living in at the time. When I finally acknowledged that I was a lesbian, once that cat was out of the bag, it was impossible not to transition. It was literally physically impossible. It was like I'd got on a train and there was no driver. The train was just going to go and there was nothing for me to do about it. I couldn't pull the brake. I couldn't slow it down. It was just going to happen. And if that had happened in the 1980s or 90s, I mean, can you imagine? It really wouldn't have been okay, particularly given the background that we came from.
Because as well in the 1980s, there was no one to receive you when that train stopped at where it needed to be, which is where you are now. Right?
Yeah. And
Or
so,
as far as I knew, there would have actually been an underground, but they were, I'm assuming, because I, as a child, I never came across trans people, was not knowingly anyway, as a
yeah,
teenager. And I was out and about in London going to Heaven and the Wag and, all that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
but
Right.
it
But
still wasn't
so
there.
I'm not to
Yeah.
my knowledge. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and this is where I think the class thing comes in. And so this is really interesting because this is the first conversation I've had with somebody who's English since the book came out, because, you know, almost all the publicity was done over here. And,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people, so the narrative in America is that, you know, you figure out that you're gay or genderqueer or whatever it is. And then if you come from a family or an environment or like a small town community that doesn't accept that, you move and you go to New York or wherever, or LA or wherever you want to go. And then you find your chosen family. Right. And so, you know, this is how the narrative works. And people have been doing it forever. That's why the whole ballroom scene, you know, came up in New York in the 1980s is that these were the chosen families.
Right.
Um, but where that narrative breaks down when you come from the background that we came from is, and I don't know if this is your experience at all, and I hope this isn't the same now as it was back then. I think it was more severe back then than it is now, and I think things have changed a bit since then. And of course, a lot of this is based in my own subjective experience of it, which was based in fear. So it is entirely possible that I sort of overemphasized it in my head because I was so afraid, because I was living in fear. I mean, what I've found since I've come out is that a lot of the fears that I had about coming out turned out to be completely misplaced. I just kind of built them up in my head because that's what fear does. Fear just creates fear. But my fear was that, you know, the English upper middle classes it's a very closed society, right? It's very elitist. And, you know, if you have an elitist society, okay, let's use the word exclusive, right? If you have an exclusive society, not only is it difficult to get into, but it's difficult to get out of. And
Yes.
so, you know, it felt to me like there was no straddling the two worlds, right? If I wanted to go and hang out with the kind of the kind of counterculture, underground, radical, genderqueer people, that wasn't something I was going to be able to do at the same time as maintaining these relationships with this background that I came from in my family. And so I would have had to have left completely.
Mm.
And the frightening thing, and so then I'm like, for years I was like, was I just a coward? Was I just
Mm.
too scared? You know, was I just chicken? But but I've been watching all these sort of old movies about um funny enough, I was watching Pride the other day, which is a fabulously
Yeah.
silly
Yeah.
kind of Billy Elliot type comedy movie, you know, and it's
Yeah.
all over sentimentalized. But you know, that idea of the chosen family, the problem is that I tried to do it with the bikers, right? So the bikers were all working class, and I tried to hang out with them, become part of them, but I was never part of them. I was never one of them. I was never accepted. I was always seen as kind of the token posh person who was kind of quite fun to have around, and that was quite a laugh to have this person. But I was never included as part of the family, and so if I had left the family that I had and tried to find chosen family, I was not convinced that they would have me and that I would feel protected enough by that new environment to feel safe doing what I needed to do, which was freaking terrifying, even at the age of 47, let alone in my 20s in the 1990s. So,
And a state of non-belonging is on a deeply wired level, to us humans as a species, a state of non-belonging, of being excluded, is an impossibly vulnerable place to be,
yeah,
isn't it? So I think that, because I mean, I've absolutely been faced with that kind of, question in terms of, these are the people I love. I have bonds with these people, but I don't belong with them, and I
yeah,
belong there. I'm trying really hard. I come from an aristocratic family, and I set up a commune and lived on the very outer reaches of society, and but could never really be one of them because I had money. I have money. I
yeah,
have money.
yeah.
And beautiful that as that is, and I would not wish to change that. It makes life really much fucking easier. Nevertheless, be crazy not to say that. Nevertheless, that belonging, and when I wrote my debut, there was definitely a moment when I was given the, publish it and you're out, or don't publish it and you'll stay in. And
Yeah,
those, you know,
yeah.
they are terrifying
It's
moments.
terrifying. They are terrifying moments. They are.
But in terms of the conformity, for you, that, so I mean, I know the home counties really well: Hampshire, West Sussex, Surrey, all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So within that environment, you growing up, and you knew you didn't belong, but you didn't know what it was, and you knew the language, but you didn't want to speak it anymore. And so when you did finally, I mean, presumably moving to joining the bikers was a way of getting out. Moving to America
Oh,
was
yeah.
a
I
way
mean,
of,
huge. I mean, that was what made all the difference, because over here, I'm just English, and it doesn't mean anything apart from the fact that I'm just English, and that's kind of just sort of intriguing and nice, and people love the slang, but it doesn't categorize me. And over here, there's oh God, I don't want to say there's an enormous amount of social mobility, because obviously there isn't, because it's no more a meritocracy over here than it is over there. But there's something about already being a foreigner in this country that meant that I could find chosen family. And I don't know what it is. I think it's something about being a foreigner, because I think that I have, when we were running the lesbian late bloomers group, I had friends over here who had grown up in Connecticut, who felt the same about being in Connecticut as I did about being in England. It's moving
yeah.
away from that original tribe, and then you can find a new tribe. And it took me a while. Um,
But again, were you conscious that move to America? Was that, I need to find my tribe, or was that just at that sense of, I
no,
gotta? Okay.
I mean, it was just what my ex-husband had decided to do. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're going to New York.
Oh,
And,
I see.
I hated where we were. We were living on the Essex-Suffolk border, and we were there for 5 years, and they were the 5 of the most unhappy years of my life. I was, um, the feeling, I mean, it was partly because I just got married, and I was, masquerading
Okay.
as a heterosexual housewife. And
Yeah.
it was impossible to keep up. I was so profoundly depressed, getting out of bed every day and just sort of putting on this outfit. I was like cosplaying, but every day. Um, and so
But you
when my
still,
ex,
well, even in those 5 years, you didn't have a word for it, or
no, I didn't have a word
you
for it.
knew.
I mean, I was beginning to understand that I was attracted to women, but I didn't.
Okay.
Again, it was this. I mean, I always knew that I was attracted to women. It was completely undeniable, but it was just sort of, it was as it came closer and closer into my central view. Here's a way of explaining it. It's like, I think a lot of it had to do with getting sober. So
Mm.
prior to getting sober, which happened 6 weeks before I got married, which is a really stupid time to get sober, um, I,
Oh,
you
brilliant.
know, yeah, yeah. It was like there was like this thing that was happening under the floorboards, right? And there was a rug over the top of the floorboards, and I was on top of the floorboards, just making as much noise as I possibly could to try and drown it out. So just party, motorbikes, alcohol, drugs, whatever I could do, just to kind of just get rid of the noise. And then I got sober, and it's like somebody kind of, the room went quiet, and somebody rolled back the rug, and then suddenly I can hear it underneath the floorboards.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just there. And I'm like, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to hold out against this. And when we moved to America and I met up with my bestie who'd been living over here for, I don't know, 15 years by that stage. And she was all part of the sort of East Village music underground scene. And the minute I went to visit her in New York, it was literally like coming home. It was like
Mm.
being an adopted person who suddenly discovers their country of origin. It was like, this is my home. I mean, the first time I went to the East Village, we went and sat in a coffee shop, and I looked around me and I was like, oh my God, these are my people. And my brother and sister-in-law always laugh at me about how I go on about finding my people. They're like, oh, if you found your people, like it's a big joke. But for me, it is literally what happened. The minute I set foot in New York, I'm like, these are my people, this is my home. And I've never stopped feeling that way. Every time I walk down the street in New York, I just feel this relief because I mean, New York is the place where weirdos come to feel like they fit in, right? And so I mean, I'm here in Connecticut, I'm still an anomaly. People are very kind and it's great, but I'm still a weird misfit. I don't socialize much out here because it just feels weird. People don't really know what to do with me. I go to New York, I'm like the most boring person there. It's amazing. I'm like completely invisible because I'm so ordinary. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
such a great feeling.
But let's go back to those 5 years for a minute, because that does fascinate me, because as you speak about them, I can feel the claustrophobia and tightness of that particular class and environment of England.
God. I mean,
And
really, you want me to talk about this?
yeah, I mean, if you're happy to, I would love to,
No,
because
I
I mean,
am.
I feel
I mean,
that way about it as well. It makes I
yeah, I mean,
feel,
it felt to me
ugh.
like I had moved to this area and there were very few people who I was supposed to socialize with. And they were
Mm,
dotted around the area and they all had the big houses. And it was the same group of people and they were all having dinner parties and you got invited to the dinner party. And there was this whole kind of hierarchical system of who's got invited? Have you got invited? Are you being invited to the right ones? Are you being left out of being invited to this one? Are you friends with that person? What do you have to do? It was like, I used to get out of bed and it's like, okay, I have two choices here. Either I enter into this madness or I just have no fucking friends. And I'm stuck out in the middle of the countryside and I'm lonely and my husband is just off working and I'm here and I have, a couple of babies and I have these women who I am supposed to, this is meant to be really, really important to me. This hierarchical social system and finding my place in it is meant to be really, really important to me, but I don't like any of these people. And so this just feels absolutely fucking horrendous.
yeah.
And I did it for 5 years. I valiantly gave it my best shot. And I feel like it was the same thing that I felt when I gave up drinking. It's like, I am just going to give this my best shot to control my drinking. I'm going to see if I can do it. And then eventually like, yeah, no, you know what? I surrender. This is, I can't drink anymore. I surrender. I cannot do life in the English countryside. Just absolutely not. This is not for me.
How many do you think of those women and men who were around you, those couples and those families, how many of them individually do you think had a truth like yours under the
That's a
covers?
very good question. I mean, I ask myself that because when I look back at, I mean, I haven't asked myself that about that particular group of people, but when I look back at my school days, I'm the only person from my year at school who is out as queer on any level. Now, that's statistically not possible.
Not possible.
So, that kind of answers the question that there must be a lot of people out there who are still just valiantly doing it. And, if any of them ever listen to this Substack, all I can say is, you don't have to do this. You really don't. There is another way, and it is much more fun.
Yeah.
And so what is also fun is that, so these two sides of my life are very separate, right? I have the kind of the England heterosexual, cisgender, female, Nikki. And then I have the America genderqueer, male, Oliver. And there's this sort of gap in between where these two things were kept very separate. So in the novel that I'm writing at the moment, I combine the two. So I've basically created a scenario whereby a group of American trans people move to the middle of the English countryside where somebody sets up a safe house for trans people who are escaping the Trump regime. So I drop my current life in the middle of my old life. And of course, it's like oil and water. Or there's got to be a better sort of chemical metaphor for something that you drop into water and then the whole thing blows up. But that's basically what I'm doing. And it's really, really fun because I know these two worlds so well at this point.
Yeah.
To put one inside the other and then see what happens, which is something that I never did. I never blew up my life in England. I just quietly exited with the least amount of noise possible. But putting these two things together is really fun.
And I'm interested, actually. Well, two things. One, when you come back to England, do you meet the ghost of Nikki? And two, do you go back now? Has your relationship to that, do you go back? Is there more? Are you able, now that you are who you are and living the true life and are safe in that sense? Is there more love? Can you feel more love for the trapped or that strange, weird English countryside in terms of that claustrophobia, or
yeah, absolutely.
do you just go back?
No, I don't. To start with, I did. To start with, when I went back, it was just traumatizing. It felt like PTSD. Not PTSD, but it felt dangerous. It felt frightening, and it felt deeply distressing because partly because it was a reminder of how fundamentally unhappy I was.
Okay.
And, it's not like I was miserable for the whole of my 20s. I had a lot of fun in my 20s. I had some really good times. And I had some really good friends. But on a fundamental level, I was always deeply unhappy because I wasn't being the person that I am. And so for several years after I came out, whenever I'd go back to England, it felt too close. And then finally, and I do think writing the memoir had a lot to do with it. I don't agree with sort of memoir as catharsis, but there is a cathartic element to writing memoir, and being able to really examine what I'd been through and what that all felt like enabled me to separate from England completely. And it is it's like being in a recently ended relationship, isn't it? It's always painful and you're always grieving until you finally separated completely. And then it's just like, okay, this is this thing that happened in the past and it was beautiful and it was messy and it was painful, but it was just something that happened to me doesn't affect you anymore. And so that's what I've reached now with England, which is I love it again because I can, because it's safe to love it again, because it can't harm me, because I'm never going to put myself in a position where England can harm me. And it also means that when I meet up with, so I mean, as an example, last time I went, and it helps that my parents are so freaking awesome. I mean, because they are just, they leave me speechless how amazing they've been. But last time I went back, which was, what are we now? It was in the spring. I think it was April. God, I can't, was it June? I can't even remember. Anyway, it was a couple of months ago. And my mum had a little tea party for their friends. And the man who did the speech at my wedding came. And he's so old school English. He's a big man. He's got the chin and the bald head. It's all like this. And he's so delightful and so sweet and so clueless about trans identities, but so earnestly interested and so kind and sort of saying all the wrong things with all the best intentions. And, there was a time in the past where I would have got upset, and I would have felt like him not really fully understanding what this is would have made me feel prickly and angry and upset, because it would have felt like a threat. Whereas now there's no threat. It's just freaking adorable. He was so funny, so sweet. It was just a sort of gorgeous little tea party. It was a gorgeous experience. So it's, I have really laid the ghosts to rest at this point.
Yeah. And no threat because you're fully realised.
Because I'm fully realised. Because the worst that could have happened has happened. I've done it. And there were a lot of losses, and those losses were very painful. But what I came out with was a life that is so much richer, having been through that experience, that it would have been if I hadn't, that the losses just don't matter anymore. Because the gains have so far outweighed the losses that it's like, okay. So that there's no threat. I mean, there's threat from the government in both this country and England, obviously. But on a personal, emotional level, there's no threat anymore.
And in terms of that close circle of family and friends that you have, well, let's say family, the old-fashioned family in Hampshire and all of that. In terms of that, because this is one of the things that, and I emailed you this, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's, I mean, I have a trans child who's grown up. They're 19. And they describe themselves as genderqueer. They're sort of fluid, and they're just beautifully everywhere. But we've had lots of conversations around hormones and surgery and all kinds of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Scary stuff for a mother, because, well, I'll go further. So that one of the things, and I think I said this, I was listening to the Joy Tuck Club, and you said cishet is not a neutral position.
Yes.
And, I've understood that, like in terms of race, I've understood white is not a neutral position. I've understood that for a very long time. But I realised, because I have a trans child, so it was right up against in my face.
Yeah.
I really hadn't understood that cishet is not a neutral position. It's a political position, just like every other position.
Yes.
And I've really, since this last week, I've really been focusing on seeing that I have been seeing cishet as the trunk.
Yeah.
And everything is a trunk.
Yes.
So then I've been consciously moving that aside. So I'm moving myself away from that central position in the discussion.
Yeah.
To being just another tree in the forest.
Yeah.
Now that feels to me like it's probably the most crucial baseline.
Yeah.
For living
100%.
as one beautiful together. So where, in terms of the old-fashioned family around you, and where are they on that, making that move?
So, mum and dad, I think that making that move is probably beyond my father's capabilities, because he's not really capable of sort of understanding that. So his
Okay.
support comes from comes from a place of sort of generosity and love.
Oh,
And he will do things like he has this gentleman's group, and they get together once a month, and one of them chooses a sort of political topic to discuss, and he sort of puts forward some argument, and then everybody discusses it. This is a bunch of men in their 80s. It's just marvelous. And his most recent one was about the British the new act in Britain that says that trans women aren't women. And God bless him for doing that, because it's a tough thing to argue when you're an 84-year-old upper middle class British man. But we sat down together and sort of worked through all the kind of various arguments, and he pulled it off. And so he does it from that perspective. He he
wow.
he he is too old and set in his ways to be able to decenter his cisness or his whiteness in any way. But that is the sort of one of the kind of foundations of the work that I'm trying to do. And I am going to preempt this by saying I am in no way comparing myself to James Baldwin, but that's basically, I'm following his template because he is the person who explained my whiteness to me. And before I read Baldwin, I didn't understand that I was white. And then I read Baldwin, and I felt like the whole world had been turned upside down. It blew my mind when I understood what he was trying to say, and I realized that I had been looking at the whole world inversely, with myself as center. And so then that was the beginning of my journey into, what they call anti-racism and decentering myself in the narrative. And so I've used that model to try and educate people about, in as much as I can in my very small way, about, and it's specifically where it applies to kids, because this is, I think,
Yeah.
that's the biggest issue that we're facing at the moment, is that and this is the mistake that I see people making again and again and again, and every single time I talk in public, I get a mother usually coming up to me afterwards saying, I've got this kid and I'm so worried, and they want to go on hormones, and they're talking about surgery, and I'm worried that they're going to, and peer pressure, and are they going to regret it, and da, 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 da. And I keep saying to them, you are talking from the position that you think that your kid is cisgender and that they're going to make a mistake. But your kid is not cisgender. Your kid is trans. The mistake that will be made is to not allow them to be trans. And all the laws and the legislation against kids getting treatment are based around protecting cis kids, right? So the whole argument is, what if a cis kid thinks they're trans, gets this treatment, and then decides they're not? Okay, so that is the perfect example of centering cisness, because statistically, and this has been proved time and time and time again, 1%, if that, of kids who transition regret it. There is like a 1% regret rate. That's less than having breast enlargements or rhinoplasties or knee surgery, right? And yet,
Or marriage,
or marriage, or whatever, or sex, or whatever. I mean, all the freaking mistakes that teenagers make.
yeah, yeah.
But shutting down access to this care for all trans kids, based on the fact that this 1% might make a mistake, is prioritizing that 1% over the 99% of kids who desperately, desperately need this care, must have this care, whose lives will be ruined without this care. And when I say their lives will be ruined without this care, I talk about, at the beginning of this conversation, I talked about how once I acknowledged my queerness, it was impossible not to transition. Because once you have said to yourself, okay, this is who I am, it becomes that reality completely supersedes the fake reality that you had imposed upon yourself. So it's like you're living in a bell jar, like Sylvia Plath, and suddenly the bell jar just disappears and you realize I'm trans. And so therefore, I've got to make the adjustments to allow myself to live comfortably in this world so that people can see me. Because as long as I look like a girl, people they're not seeing me. They're seeing a girl, and there's a bell jar in between us, and I'm living in isolation. So I need to do the things that I need to do so that people can see me. Because when people see me now, they just see this short, bald, middle-aged man. Great. That's exactly what I am. It's fantastic. I am not nearly as pretty as I used to be as a girl, and I could not give a fight up because people can see me, right? And so if you take a teenager who goes through this process of discovering that they are trans or shedding the layers that they use to disguise the fact that they were trans through fear, and then you say to them, well, there's a solution for this, but you can't have it. I mean, it leaves me breathless. The cruelty of that leaves me breathless. And so to create these laws that would do that just to protect this 1% of people who might have made a mistake, it's insane. It's like saying, let's ban chemotherapy for kids just in case we accidentally give chemotherapy to the wrong person. What about all the kids with cancer who need chemotherapy? So that's all it is. But until people have done what you've done, that's very hard for people to get. And I know this because friends who I've had forever, who love me, who support me, who are totally woke, who are left-wing liberals, who support my transness, they get stuck on this issue. And they get stuck on it because they are always thinking first of the cis kid. They're never thinking first of the trans kids. So I get very hyperbolic about this stuff because it's
never apologize, because this is the crucial bit. And 2 weeks ago, I was even leading up thinking about, okay, I'm going to be talking to Oliver, and definitely there was a part of me that I get stuck, and I have been very, very stuck on that bit. And I was like, oh, can I talk to him about that? Because I just don't understand how to get over that bit. And I'm an ally, and I've got a trans child, but it's good that, there I was with all the things you've heard a million times. Left-leaning, liberal, progressive, blah, blah, blah. And then I heard, and I think it's a matter of hearing it enough times, maybe, or maybe it was just the right moment, or maybe it was the way you are. Maybe it was the brilliant conversation you had with Rachel, and I can't remember her other name, but Phoebe, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe, who knows what it was, but something just clicked in my head. And I was like, oh, okay, it's about, I have been centering cis het in the conversation. And then I started thinking about having one of those kind of, I thought, I think I was out on the tube then, and I was thinking about the source, like where this grew from. Let's say the cis het white male takes the center stage in all policy, in all societal. That's it. That everything has been born of his centrist position.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking about, well, if we now just see that as a choice, not a given natural absolute, and we took that away, I can feel and we are just equal trees in a forest. There's no dominance, there's no hierarchy, no one's the other. We're all just symbiotically living together. If I put myself in that position, and I could feel the what's the word? It's not. It was like a kind of shaky vulnerability around it. It was just like, what? Nobody's in charge.
Yeah, and I think that. Yeah, and that and this is why I'm patient with people who don't get it, because I didn't get it, right? When I first started understanding that I was trans, it was discombobulating in the extreme. I remember my my kids. I'm terrified of heights, right? And my kids one day, they got those Oculus things, goggles, right?
Oh, I've been.
And and they said, put these on. Where would you like to go? You can be underwater, you can be in space. And I'm like, oh, I'll be in space, right? So I put these things on. I thought when I put them on that I was going to be like in a spaceship looking out of space, but no, you're just fucking floating in space. And I started screaming because
Yeah.
I was just floating in space, and I was like, ah! And they were like, Dad, just take the goggles off,
Okay.
and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, thank God, thank God. But that is what it felt like when I first started understanding my gender queerness. Was it felt like
Mm.
all the structures that I understood from society had just vanished, and we don't understand how profoundly those structures make us feel safe until you start
Mm-hmm.
taking them away. And then when you start
Yeah.
taking away those structures, people feel very, very unsafe. And
Very
so,
unsafe.
and the minute people feel unsafe, they're like, oh, put the structures back. They must be there for a reason. And so I really, I have deep sympathy for parents who are struggling with this, because everything about what is going on for them feels unsafe, particularly the fact that they are responsible for helping their kid make these decisions. And that is a terrifying responsibility when it comes to helping your kid make a decision that you yourself don't fully understand. It's a lot for a parent. So this is why, as you say, the more people talk about it, the more people write about it, the more people make movies about it, the more people make music about it, the more normalized it becomes, the more visible it becomes, the less scary it becomes. And then when you're put in this position of having to confront it in your own family, you've got places you can turn, and you've got people you can see, and you've got resources that you can go to. And that's why it's different now than it was in the 1980s, because in the 1980s, we didn't have any of that. And
Nothing.
that's kind of what makes the difference. And also, it goes back to sorry, I'm blabbing on now, but it goes back
It's a,
to, what Baldwin said about, he refers to people who believe that they're white, right? And because whiteness doesn't exist without blackness, and blackness doesn't exist without whiteness, as these two sort of opposing forces. But it doesn't need to be that way. There doesn't have to be, we don't have to be white if we're not creating this hierarchical structure in which we want to put ourselves at the top. And that was what my first book of essays was all based around, that, which is this separation. I mean, going back to your question of why do we all think that cis is the center? And this first book of essays I wrote was all about deconstructing these fences that we've put up around these different categories that just don't need to be there. I mean, they really don't need to be there. The only reason they're there is because people wanted to categorize people. I mean, my friend Hugh Ryan, who's a historian, has written about this extensively. In the old days, there was no such thing as lesbian or gay. So men and women, back in the 1800s, lived very gendered lives. So the men socialized with the men and the women socialized with the women. And so if men had like romances with men, that was considered completely normal. And in fact, a man who was having a sexual relationship with another man was just considered highly sexed. He was so
yeah.
sexual that, his sexuality had to come out somewhere. And if he's only with men, then it was going to come out with a man. It didn't make him gay. It made him a very virile man. And the same with the women, is overly, it was of course gendered. The men are virile and the women are romantic, but the women were having romantic relationships with each other just because they were overly romantic people. They were poets and they were writers, and of course Virginia Woolf's going to happen there with Peter Sackville West. And then it was, and in those days, the delineation was the queerness, right? It was about being, if you were identifying as a different gender, that was when you were, ooh, there's something a bit dodge about that those are the people who we need to be a bit careful about, and those are the people who we're going to arrest, and those are the people who we're going to create laws against, because that was kind of crossing a line that was not socially acceptable. And so trans people have been overtly discriminated against since the very beginning. And so when people say, oh, trans people are now going through what gay people went through, 40 years ago, no, trans people have been subject to this kind of overt discrimination forever. It's just more prominent now because gay people have been accepted and have got all the rights that they need, and everybody's coming after trans people in this very visible and vocal way that people are like, oh, wow, that's rough, isn't it? Was like, it's kind of always been rough. It's not new. And so this is this kind of last frontier that if we could make people understand that we're probably all a little bit genderqueer and that's okay, that maybe we can get
Absolutely.
past it.
Yes. And so just building on that, this absolutely not. Trans people are making a transgression in terms of those absolutely set. This is how we keep the world secure and safe. And we all know that's the transgression. That's absolutely not, isn't it? That's
Yeah.
the kind of fighting and the
Yeah.
phobia against.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
By
as
the
you
way,
say, it is a phobia. It's fear, you know, that's all it is.
yeah, 100%. I'm reading James Baldwin, by the way. I'm reading Another Country.
Oh,
So wonderful you brought that up.
yeah.
Fantastic. I knew that would make my mind go blank. But um, sorry, I'm just thinking about James Baldwin because it absolutely is exactly the same thing. In fact, I just want to revert back. If there are any parents listening to this with trans children, again, I would say when you get stuck on it, because it is such an important bit, just to pull back from all the rights, wrongs, should, shouldn't, all of that stuff, and just to pull back to the moving away from the centrist position and allowing everyone to you know what I mean, that kind of equal voice. I think that was I think that's the message. I think that has really changed
Yeah.
things.
And the other message, which goes against the anti-trans propaganda is, you know, if your kid comes to you and says that they're questioning their gender identity, the best thing you can do is just ask questions. You know, ask them rather than imposing upon them your fears and thoughts and beliefs. Ask them what that actually means, because these experiences are incredibly varied, and what your child is going through is inevitably not going to be the same as what the kid in the movie or the book or the, you know, music video, whatever it is that you've just seen, is going to be going through. And the other thing is, there is this misconception. I mean, it's not a misconception. It is propaganda that has been delivered over and over and over and over again by the media until people believe that it's true. That a kid will just go to school, you know, they're you know, reaching puberty. There's a bunch of kids who think they're genderqueer. They think it's cool to be genderqueer. They come home, say I'm trans, and, you know, a week later they're on hormones. And, you know, that's not how this works. Generally, how the narrative of getting to the point of hormones is that a kid has felt, like me, just sort of wrong for a long time. And then they start trying to work out what this wrongness is, and they're looking around them to see what they can find that reflects, that mirrors this feeling that they're having. And so inevitably they are drawn towards the other genderqueer kids, because those kids are mirroring back their identity to them. And then they will start talking to those genderqueer kids, and between them they'll start sort of figuring out what this is. And they're probably having those conversations for a long time before they even find the courage to talk to their parents. So by the time they start talking to their parents, they're already halfway down their journey. Because talking to your parents about this stuff is a scary thing to do, and you kind of need to have some kind of ground under your feet before you do that. Or at least I certainly did. You know, I was in my 40s, for heaven's sake. And so then you go to your parent, and then you start talking to your parent about it, and that conversation starts happening. And then maybe the parent is like, okay, well, we should be talking to a therapist at this point. So then you start talking to a therapist. And at some stage, and again, it's different here than it is in England, because here, depending on what state you're in, you know, if you then decide to go and get gender affirming care, it can happen quite quickly, unless you're in the wrong state, in which case it's not going to happen at all. In England, the wait lists for gender affirming care are like 6 or 7 years. So even if your parent is like accepting and says, great, I can see that you need treatment, you're practically going to be through puberty before you've even got your first appointment. And so this whole idea of, you know, put on the brakes, slow everything down, you know, kids are being rushed into these decisions, they're really not. the point being is that once the kid has really fully accepted who they are, the urgency to try and align their physical exterior with that interior identity becomes overwhelming. And that is when you get the risk of severe depression, anxiety, suicide, all the rest of it. Because when you suddenly realize that you have this identity that can be manifested and you're prevented from manifesting it, that becomes an unbearable place to be. And I know that because I've been there.
Yeah, you've pretty much exactly outlined my experience with my beautiful genderqueer young person.
Yeah.
Who is enjoying a fluidity, and they haven't landed anywhere. And I think that's another thing I really witness in.
Yeah.
Is they may never land anywhere. And I saw watching them as they've gone along. I've seen how the pressure to fix it. To fix it in a place. They don't want to fix it in a place.
Yeah.
So that happens as well.
And again, yes, exactly. And that pressure again comes from cis people, because I am more palatable as this than most of my non-binary or genderqueer friends, who cis people still kind of like, I don't know what to do with this, right? Whereas I'm like, oh, he's just a short, balding man. It's easy, right? I pass. It makes my life much easier. I mean, my life is so much easier now as a man. I mean, if you want to believe that, patriarchal privilege exists, transition, and then you'll find out firsthand. But my guess would be that far more people are non-binary and genderqueer than binary trans like I am. It's just I'm old. I'm just doing it the old-fashioned way. If I was 30 years younger, I would probably identify as non-binary as well. And also, I love being able to manifest this identity so solidly. It gives me such pleasure. It still does. And I transitioned 8 years ago. 8 years ago. Good grief. It still gives me pleasure to get up in the morning and see my flat, hairy chest in the mirror.
Yeah.
My old flat, hairy chest in the mirror.
I've always been uncomfortable with any woman. Like, I think I would have been non-binary if I had this conversation with friends just the other day. We both, two of us were like, yeah, we would have been.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how queer are you? Well, sorry, direct question.
No, it's totally, absolutely, go for it. I mean, I like men, rather than women. And I've tried sleeping with women, but I wasn't into it. So I'm heterosexual. But in terms of, gender, and I wish we could get into construct, but I can see we've got 5 minutes and I've got one other question I want to ask you. But yeah, in terms of me, I'm very uncomfortable. Because I hate all of the things that get poured onto
all the stuff. Yeah,
I fucking hate it, man. It pisses me off that the make. I very, very rarely wear makeup. I'd go out. It happened. I don't know when it happened, but I began to notice. Why the fucking hell don't men we have to wear makeup and you have to? What the fuck is that, man? Why do I have?
No, it's all bullshit.
It's bullshit. So I hate like that. And I was with a friend the other day who was talking about, am I going to meet someone? And she said, I don't, because normally I see her in kind of like, sweats. And she was like, I don't know how you dress normally, but you'll probably have to like up your dress. And I just go, fuck you.
Fuck that.
I love you, but fuck you.
No, but that's the joy of our age. It's just like, all the women I know are just like done with that bullshit,
Done. But talking of that, because we've only got a little bit, just the challenge for trans women appears to me to be much greater than the challenge for trans.
I mean,
right?
Oh, so I mean, chalk and cheese. I mean, being a trans man is misogyny. It's just misogyny. It's just they get it all. They get they get transphobia. They get misogyny. If they're black, you add racism into it. I mean, just everything. Being transitioning from female to male is a piece of cake compared to transitioning from male to female, which is why the t-shirt says protect the dolls, because mostly trans dudes are kind of pretty much we're all right, I mean, it's just it's the whole bathroom thing is a bit weird at the moment, because I just don't know where to pee, because I'm breaking the law or I'm going to get maced by a woman who thinks I'm a man coming into a woman's bathroom. But beyond that, being a trans man, I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I'm sure there are trans men who have had a rough time with it, but it's pretty freaking easy. That's not the case when you're a trans woman. It's rough and it's scary and it's dangerous.
And the
And
bathroom thing has made all of them more vulnerable.
I mean,
Hasn't it? The bathroom.
talking about Phoebe and Rachel, I mean, they don't go out anymore.
Right. This is
I mean, they
right,
can't go
because
into a men's bathroom. That's not safe. But they can't go into a women's bathroom. That's not safe either. So where do they go? Unless it's a gender-neutral bathroom, they're screwed.
yeah.
I mean, it's really profoundly fucked people's lives. And again, I don't think the majority of cis people understand this because they have never had to think about where they pee. And when you tell a cis person, oh, there's this bathroom bill, they're like, well, it's just peeing. What does it really matter? I mean, just
Right.
pee when you get home. But you can't. If you're going out for the day, you are at some point going to have to pee somewhere. And there are apps now where you can find gender neutral bathrooms. So, if you're out,
I know in
but it's
in
hard.
London, for instance, the Royal Academy. In fact, all of the big museums and
Yeah.
galleries are gender.
Yeah.
New.
But mostly it's just and the thing is about the bathroom bill, and I know we're really running out of time, but I will say this last thing is it really is only designed to exclude trans people. There is no reason for it. It's totally irrelevant and pointless. Nobody has ever been attacked by a trans person in the bathroom ever. I mean, maybe there's one example, but I mean, for fuck's sake, people, this is not a threat. It is specifically being done because it is the first step in segregation. It is an active move towards segregation, and people have verbalized this. Right-wing politicians over here say, no, we don't want the trans people to feel comfortable going into the bathrooms because we don't want them to feel comfortable. We don't want them to feel like they're accepted and allowed. We want them to know that we don't want them. We want to segregate them and we want to get rid of them. And the bathroom bill is the first step in that direction. It's just pure, blatant discrimination.
I've just read Rebecca Solnit's "The Beginning Comes After the End," and she really you've read it, but she really voiced the position I feel around this sense that yes, right now it feels like it's getting worse. I mean, exactly as you've just laid out. But her argument is this is the death throes of a structure.
Well, I mean, I hope so.
1,000-year-old story that says hierarchy, it says white, it says male, it says all of these stories. And I
hope you're right. It's just for the people who are in it at the moment. The fact that it might get better in the future doesn't offer them any solace.
Sweet pill. But how far away are we, do you think, from that sort of turnaround where we really understand where there is no center, nobody's taking up the center? I mean, I'm asking you a big question, but how far?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because I remember when I launched the book 2 years ago. I was in LA doing a launch with Roxane Gay, my editor, and somebody asked me that question. I'm like, oh no, I'm really. I said the same as you. I'm really hopeful that it's all going to be fine. There's death rates, and Roxane looked at me and said, "That's very optimistic of you." And I was like, "Yay, I'm the optimist." But I have to say, the last couple of years have worn me down a bit.
Okay.
So I'm not quite looking at it in those terms anymore. I mean, I pray, but look at racism. It's 2026. People are still being killed for being black. A woman got lynched a couple of weeks ago, hung from a fucking tree for being black. It's, so I don't know. We just keep fighting the good fight, don't we? That's all we can do.
And in terms of not staying silent, but actually speaking, where can people go to speak? Places and organizations and any.
I mean, there are a ton. I mean, in England, I don't know, but there are a lot of organizations. I mean, literally just Google what trans organizations can I support, and you'll come up with.
No, there's a Substack, and I've already subscribed to her.
Well, in America, I would say Erin Reed, Erin in the morning. Erin Reed is absolute top notch over here. In England, anything that Sean Fay writes, just read everything that Sean Fay writes because she's the queen.
Okay.
Those are two very good places to start. Yeah.
And I don't know if you're aware of the Good Law Project, but my friend Jo Moore runs Law, and they are very vocal, very obviously they're really fighting the good fight. So anybody listening, if you actually want to put your money where your mouth is, the Good Law is a great place to put it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, Oliver, it's been an absolute pleasure. That hour's flown by. I hope we
Yeah, it
meet
really
one
has,
day.
hasn't it?
If I
Oh, well,
come,
definitely. Next time
I'm
I'm
gonna.
in England. Or next time you're in New
Yeah,
York.
please do.
Exactly. Come visit me in
Next time
Brooklyn.
I'm in Brooklyn, visit you. Yeah, can't wait.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so articulate and brilliant and such a great writer. This is absolutely brilliant. Everybody read it. And also, I'm going to get a copy, but Adult Human Male, is that what it's
Adult
called? The
Human
essays?
Male.
Adult,
Yes, I think it's still in print. It was published by
but not in
Micro
the UK.
Press. You can get it on
Haven't.
Amazon. You should be able to get it on Amazon.
I'm going to get hold of a copy.
Hopefully.
I recommend to these by Read. Fantastic.
Amazing.
Okay.
Eleanor, such a
No
pleasure.
pleasure. Okay.
Lots of
I'll
love.
see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.